Jack Spade back here with you, High Noon Leatherworks, for another leather adventure. And today, we're going to start a new project, and we're going to do a custom knife sheath for this Kukri knife. So this is a custom made knife, and we're going to make the custom sheath that it's going to go into. Now, the customer wants this to be a cross draw type sheath. So with a normal knife sheath, it would be straight. And with this blade, the way that it's curved, we can't make that sheath straight, because if you pulled straight up on this each time that you pulled it out of the sheath, it's going to eventually cut that sheath where that blade widens out. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it more of a breakaway type sheath, but it's going to be snapped. So there will be a top that folds over the blade, this flat part of the blade, and it'll snap onto the front of the sheath. So what that'll allow you to do, it's going to keep this from moving, so it's not going to fall out or it's not going to move, but you pop that open, and then what that's going to do is allow that knife to come out without dragging on the rest of the sheath. So what we're going to do is we are going to make it in two pieces, I believe. At least that's what I have in my mind, is two pieces. A front piece and a back piece. The back piece will have the wraparound with the snaps. So it will entail a little bit of sewing and stitching. So first thing we're going to do is make the pattern. So this may take a little trial and error. So come on in and let's get this project started. I usually start a pattern project, especially something this big, with a full sheet of poster board. Well, I get ready to start this project and I look in my supplies and I don't have a piece of poster board any bigger than this. So what I did, I always save these these dividers that are in like a 24 pack of Mountain Dew or Pepsi or whatever. I always save those because they're nice and thick. So I just throw them underneath my workbench and save them. And what I did was I took 4 of them out and took clear box tape and taped them together. So now I have a nice big thick piece of cardboard to make my pattern out of. So just try to recycle some of that stuff and not have to, like in an emergency like this, run to the store and buy more poster board. Now I'll put that on my list. Next time when I go to the store, I'll make sure that I grab a few more pieces. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, a lot of pattern making is what you see in your mind's eye. You know, what's it going to look like when it's done. This back piece, I'm going to want to make sure, remember I'm making it in 2 pieces, so I'm going to want to make sure that I leave plenty of room for stitching. I probably will put a piece of spacer leather in between the 2 pieces, just so it gives the blade right here on this round edge something to sit against instead of my stitches, even though we're going to make this pop open so it pulls straight out. So it's going to be a little tricky to get the geometry right on this. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by marking where my handle stops, and it looks like I'm not going to be able to use my ballpoint pen. I'm going to have to go to a Sharpie, so I want to be real careful I don't mark on the knife itself. So I'm going to mark where the handle is, and the handle where it's at the blade does kind of round a little bit, so I'll put that in there once we get started. And then I'm going to hold this and go ahead and very lightly start my first piece, or the back itself. Now remember, I'll have a front piece too, so it'll be sewn all the way up till this blade starts to curve. So right about there where I can pull that blade in and out straight, that part of the sheath is going to be straight and sewn together. So that will be securely placed in a sheath part. This part over here will be folded over so that it can snap. So what I'm going to have to do is take the back piece and extend it where this curves. I'm going to extend that enough to where I can fold that over and have it snap. So I'm going to come down just a little bit off of that handle, where that handle rounds at the blade, and then I can't go more than this thinnest piece here. So I'm going to measure that. That's 1 1/4 inches. So I don't want to go any further than 1 1/4 inches. So I'm going to mark that at 1 1/4 and then extend my line to there. I'm going to do the same down here where it curves, because I want that, when it folds over, I want it to be straight this direction with the handle. So a lot of different geometry is going into this. So there's my 1 1/4 there. Then I'm going to want to round those corners. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my straight line. Now I'm going to have to come up with something to round those corners with. First, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to measure and allow for my stitching groove line here. So I'll probably allow a 1/4 inch for my edge from the knife out to the edge of the sheath itself, and put my stitch in the center of that. And that will give the knife a little bit of room in there so you can pull it in and out, and it's not so hard to get in and out. So that will stitch all the way up to this corner where this curves. It's going to stitch all the way up to this corner where the handle starts, and this piece will be loose on this side, on the top. It'll be loose down to here. Then it'll start being stitched again. Then this piece will fold over from the back and snap into that front piece. So I've got to keep in mind that I have to make this front piece also. So I'm going to finish the back pattern first, then I'm going to do the front pattern so that I can match to the back pattern, because those have to be sewn together. So I'm going to move my knife off my pattern material. This is what I have so far for the back. So you can tell it's a lot different than just a standard straight knife sheath. I'm going to go take my ruler, and I'm going to mark a 1/4 inch randomly all the way around my pattern that I just drew around my knife. Now remember, this 1/4 inch is going to be where I put my groove line and my stitches. It's where I'm going to stitch the actual sheath together, the two pieces. And then I come around the corner and I'll do the same thing up this straight edge of that back. All the way up to where my flap starts to go over. So that is a 1/4 inch larger than the knife. And then I'll take, you can see the 1/4 inch difference, and then I'll take my Sharpie and come back around, and basically all I'm doing is following the edge and connecting those dots that I just put on there that were a 1/4 inch away. And this is going to be a pretty good size knife sheath, because that Kukri is a big knife. So the geometry of the backbone of the knife is straight on the backbone right here. So that's the way the sheath will be. But this curve, the sheath is going to follow that curve up to this point. Should be interesting. And we can always use the pattern. It's thick enough, hopefully, that we can use the pattern to see how well that knife will fit into the sheath before we cut our leather, to see if we need to do any changes or editing. Alright, so I want to double check with my handle, and the handle will dip down just a little bit. So I am going to curve that. I'm not going to cut that straight off. But on the back piece also, I'm going to need enough leather back here to make my loop. So it's going to have to sew in back here so that you can put it on his belt. So if I make, probably make a, let's see, that would be on the back piece. So probably a 2-inch loop. So I'll have to give myself at least a 1/4 inch. So I'm going to have to cut this a little longer, and I measured it 2.5 inches. I can always trim some of that excess off if I need to, but once you cut that leather, you want to make sure it's plenty long enough. And what that's going to do is that's also going to kick that a little bit if I don't move this line. If I keep it straight with the top, let's see if I can get you a better picture here. If I try to keep that line where I cut that leather to fold that over, look what that's going to do to this. That's going to kick that forward or backwards, and I don't want that. He wants this knife to sit straight up and down. So I'm going to have to try to change the angle of this strap. If that strap is straight up and down there, that will make the knife. That will make the knife with the handle sit straight. So I think I'm okay. So we'll make that. Looks like we're going to be approximately 2 inches wide from where it folds over. And then we want to make sure that we're again, we can take this pattern and cut it and try it and see what it got. Approximately 2 inches. And then we can fold that over and see what the geometry of that looks like. There's what the drawing looks like at this point. And I will also, let me get something to draw rounded corners. I want to round the corners on that. Let's see. I can't really round the corners on that much just because of the where it's going to stitch. So what I might want to do is actually extend that a little bit so that I can stitch that rounded part and I'll still have 2 inches there. So let me see what this looks like. If I round that, and then I'll show you what I'm thinking with a dotted line. As far as stitching. So that'll fold over down to here on the back, and then that'll stitch, and that'll give him plenty of room to put a belt through there. Rounded corners on this piece, this flap, that snaps. I'm going to use this other end of this. I've talked about this a little bit in previous videos, but I keep all kinds of weird stuff that has rounded corners on it. Like there's a large rounded corner. Anything like that that I was going to throw away off of something that's broken or whatever, I keep it so I can use it as a pattern. So that gives you an idea of what that flap's going to look like now with the rounded corners. And it'll make a lot more sense when I cut it out. So that'll fold over. My snaps, I'd like to put 2 snaps on it, and I'd like to put them approximately in the middle. I'll take this shell casing and go around it just to kind of give an idea of positioning of the snaps. And you notice I'm not measuring them yet. I'll do that on my leather itself, but I just want an idea of what it's going to look like, because this is on the back side anyway. So that kind of gives you an idea where the snaps are. And again, we're going to have to do a front piece. So that front piece is going to go all the way up, stop here stitching wise, and then it's going to curve. Let me get the knife back on there where I have my pattern, and then it's going to come up, and I'm just going to make a dotted line or a dashed line where that's going to fit. So there's where the front piece of leather will go. But it's not stitched there. It's not stitched on this dotted line at all. It doesn't start stitching till down here, which is the straight part. Then it starts getting stitched. So that gives me my front piece and my back piece. So what I'll have to do is actually cut this pattern out and then lay it on top of another piece of pattern material and then cut out the top piece. So let's go ahead and cut this one out. And I'm pretty much just gonna freehand this. That Sharpie is a wide enough, thick enough line that I can follow it pretty well. And I like to try to follow those curves the best I can, and then make sure I stay on my self-healing mat. I may have to move my pattern material. I'm trying not to get in your way that much. And I can switch directions here. I can come in from the other side. following the outside line of the pattern, because remember, I drew the outside line to make sure that I have enough room for a groove line and stitching. So I'm going to come up, cut in just a hair, and then continue cutting on that pattern line, the outside line, for the belt loop. Alright, so there's the actual pattern for the back. Here's my flap that's going to fold over the knife. Let's go ahead and score that. And let's see how I want to do that, because I need it to fold this direction. So let's score this right on that dotted line that I drew on there, and let's see if I'm just using a stylus to put a dent or a score in the cardboard to make it fold easy. So you're breaking the fibers in the cardboard to get it to fold over. And then I'll use my Sharpie again and give you an idea on the snap placement, because I had it on the opposite side. So there's what it would look like when it folds over from the back onto the front piece of leather. That's what's going to hold that knife in there. That knife is not going to go anywhere when it's in like so, and this piece folds over that flat part of that knife. That's going to fold over and snap onto that front piece of leather that's sewn to the back piece. So that knife is not going to go anywhere until you unsnap this, then you can pull the knife out. At least that's the idea behind the pattern that I'm making. Then I also want to fold my strap over for the belt loop. So I am going to score that, and let's see if I score it in the right spot. And looks to be pretty close. So there's what that looks like on the back side now. And where I put those dotted lines, that's where it would stitch. So that's going to give me approximately 2¼ inches, 2⅛ inch to put the belt through in order to put that on his belt. And then there's what the front side looks like. So if we put that knife in there now, that gives you an idea what that looks like without the front piece of leather on it. So pretty cool. And I think it'd be very secure, and if we put it on our belt, it's going to sit perfect. Looks like it's just going to sit perfect. So I think we can move forward with the pattern, and what we're going to do is make the front piece. Now the front piece only goes to here, right here, then it moves down, and it only goes to here. So what we'll do is we'll take our Sharpie, and remember, it won't have either flap, so we don't have to worry about that. I'll come down here on this end of the pattern. Well, no, I might use that later. I'll hang on to that. So I'll move down to this end of the pattern material where I was, and we'll go ahead and make a pattern for the front. And you're going to want this one the same size as the back, because they're going to match up and be sewn together. So you need to make sure that it's right on the money when you're drawing your pattern. I'll just put a little dot there so I know where that goes on the back side. And again, if you cut, the old adage, measure twice, cut once, you know, if you cut your material, your leather, just a little too large, you can always trim it down. But if you cut it too small from the get-go, from the beginning, then it's going to make it very difficult to be able to use that piece of leather. So this goes on top. Yeah, then that way, if I need, that's plenty big enough, if I need to trim any of that off on the leather piece itself that goes on top, that gives me enough to do that. So I'm going to follow that line. I'm just going to tear that scrap off. Turn this around and I'm going to follow the line. And I'm going to cut right on that Sharpie line. Again, when you use a Sharpie, you know, depending on whether it's fine, extra fine, but it draws a pretty thick line compared to a ballpoint pen. You use a fine ballpoint pen, it draws a pretty tight line, but ballpoint pen doesn't like to work on this slick coated cardboard. Sorry if I keep putting my hand in the way. Alright, so there's my front piece. Let me get rid of this scrap piece of material. Now I'm going to, since that's my front, let's see, it doesn't, I'm just going to leave it the way it is, and if I need to trim the leather to fit after I cut the leather out, then that's what we'll do. So, right now, this piece is the back, and I'm going to mark that back, and this is the front, and I'll kind of give it a little, and this is not going to be perfect by any means, but I'm just giving it kind of that feel of that 1/4 inch line where I'm going to stitch it, and then where it's not going to be stitched. So there's the front, there's where it's going to be stitched. It won't be stitched here or here, obviously, and this would fit on the back like so. This would go to the back, and that would fold over and snap over the knife. So this is what the sheath will look like finished. Now let's go ahead and put the knife in there, keep from hurting myself, and then this would come over the knife if it stays in there. It would if it was sewn. This would come over the knife and snap. So this is actually what it would look like. So I've got my pattern now. The next step is to cut out the leather, and I think we'll move that to the next video. We've got our patterns cut out for the front and the back for the Kukri knife sheath, and next step on the next video, we'll go ahead and cut out our leather, and we'll start getting this project moving with the leather end of it. So thanks for coming, thanks for watching. Kind of a neat project. I know this knife is very special to the person I'm building this sheath for, so I hope he's watching, and as I always say, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.